I'm here with a lady who almost needs no introduction, but this is Rowenna Fielding, who is the data protection lead at Protecture. Rowenna, you have a very big presence. You're known very much as the GDPR expert. What do you feel has been achieved by GDPR in the last few months since it really came to the forefront?
So for me, I think the best part of the GDPR has been organisations realising that they had been ignoring data protection for the last 20 years, and in order to get on board with the GDPR requirements, they had to do that last 20 years worth of work as well as the new stuff. So it's resulted in a huge change in attitude and process and culture towards data protection, which I think is really, really positive, even if it did arise from panic.
Yes. Do you feel that companies really are taking it seriously now?
I would say that depends on the organisation. I think a lot of organisations would want to take it seriously, would like to take it seriously, but they're hampered by a lack of knowledge, which again goes back to having paid sort of cosmetic lip service to data protection for the last 20 years. And so they don't necessarily know what it is they should be doing. And also a lot of business models have been built and a lot of business process has been built on the basis of not integrating data protection. So organisations are finding that in order to do this stuff right and properly, they're not actually able to provide the infrastructure and resources that they really should have designed into their processes but forgot about. So saying you take data protection seriously is a bit of a red flag for me. It's like, I don't know if you've seen The Legal Gentleman where Tubbs goes, "We didn't burn him." And that's what, when I see a privacy notice that says we take data protection very seriously, that immediately makes me go, okay, I'm going to have a closer look at this because I'm going to test that assertion. Pretty much always there are major problems with the privacy notice. So if you don't want closer scrutiny, don't make that claim unless you're prepared to absolutely defend it.
Fine, good advice. Do you feel that the ICO has given businesses enough advice and enough clarity?
Yes, absolutely. I think in terms of advice and guidance, the materials they put out for the general public and for organisations, they do a really good job. All they can do is say what the law says and what the considerations are. What a lot of businesses, especially small, medium enterprises, have been asking for is spoon feeding. They want a specific answer to a specific question, and that's not what a regulator is for. So when I hear people say, oh, the ICO doesn't give us enough guidance, what they're really saying is, we've got a load of guidance, but we want answers. And the regulator's not there to give people answers. If you want answers, either go and get educated or hire a professional data protection expert who will walk you through those answers. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there that people aren't accessing in the right way. They're not looking at it as, here is guidance for us to be able to make our own decisions. They're scanning through it for binary yes-no answers, and data protection law is principles-based. There are very few binary yes-no answers in there.
There were a lot of myths that surrounded it and a lot of noise and things that, people will now say, we didn't need to send all those marketing emails. What are the big failures that you've seen?
So there's a hashtag on Twitter, GDPR rubbish, where I kind of collect.
Did you start
things.
it?
I might have done a little bit, yeah. Things like you need consent for everything. No, consent is one of a bunch of appropriate lawful bases. Choose the one that's appropriate. Organisations over 250 people have to have a DPO. That was in an early draft of the GDPR and it was changed, but the myth still persists. Whether or not you need a DPO depends on the type of processing of personal data you're doing, not how big you are. What are the other ones? Let me see. Yes. The ICO will automatically fine you 4% of annual global turnover if you breach any part of GDPR, which is just nonsense. The fine limit is a limit, it's a ceiling. The ICO has never ever, until the other week, levied a maximum fine, and it was the maximum under the previous legislation anyway. It's not going to happen. Let me see what other ones are. There's some absolutely juicy ones out there. You need a lawyer to do data protection? Well, if you go to a data protection lawyer, you will get good data protection advice. If you go to a general commercial contracts conveyancing property probate lawyer, then you will not get good data protection advice. It's a specialist subject. It's like saying you could go to any doctor for brain surgery. You can't. Also, lawyers tend to focus on legal risk, but actually the GDPR requires you to look not just at legal risk, but at the risk to the rights and freedoms of the data subject. And to be able to put that into business process and business culture and systems design, that's not necessarily a skill set a lawyer is going to have. There are some that do, and they're very good. But going to an experienced practitioner is probably going to be a better bet than getting some legal advice and saying, okay, we've had legal advice, job done.
Good advice again. Do you think that the public understand it? Do you think they understand their rights, and do you think they care?
They don't understand their rights, largely due to massive misrepresentation by media, because journalists don't understand data protection generally either. Do they care? Well, when you start explaining to people all of the ways in which their data is used against them, so to charge them higher prices, to deny them opportunities, to exploit and manipulate, then they start to care. Also, when you mention the right to compensation, then they start to care. Mm-hmm. There's a few people who will say nothing to hide, nothing to fear, but that portrays a lack of understanding of what privacy is. Privacy isn't the right to hide, it's the right not to be interfered with in an unfair or an unwarranted way. And data privacy is to do with interference with the intangible self, you as represented in data. And these are concepts that we don't teach in schools, we don't teach in colleges, there is no public information campaign until recently. So I don't think the general public really understand data protection. And I think that's a shame, because it is a very empowering thing, and in a world where the use of data threatens individual freedoms and democracy and a whole load of stuff, it's important for people to know this. So I would like to see more education of the general public, and I don't think you can leave that to the data controllers, despite having an obligation to be transparent, because on the whole, the attitude is what's the minimum we can get away with, rather than how do we make this really clear.
And do you feel if people did really understand it, that we would see a real shift in how people share data with companies and how companies use it?
Yes, I think so. Not necessarily with how people share data with companies, but certainly on what their expectations of how that company uses it. And not just companies, so the public sector as well, and certainly charities. So I think, all of the rights depend on transparency. If someone's not being clear with you on what they're doing, you can't exercise your other rights. So, but the reason it's difficult to be transparent is that there are hundreds and thousands of data flows and data uses that half the time are opaque even to the senior executives. If you hire an app developer and they use third-party modules for things like location, payment processing, sign-up, the person hiring the app developer has no idea that they've just handed over their app users' data to 30-odd advertising network organisations. So there's a whole cultural issue of understanding what is going on that is missing, but I think will be pushed forward by people starting to demand to understand what's going on.
And what do you think we're going to see in the next 12 months? Are we going to see the first fine?
Crystal ball. I absolutely don't know what we're going to see in terms of regulation. Certainly out of other European countries, we're seeing regulation on areas that have been perhaps not looked at very hard before. So the French regulator, CNIL, has just issued a ruling on certain aspects of online advertising and consent. The Dutch Data Protection Authority issued an opinion on Microsoft claiming to be a data processor when actually they were doing a whole load of profiling at the back end of Microsoft product users. So I think there'll be a lot of very interesting regulatory opinion. I think there'll be incremental improvements, baby steps in what organisations do. I think privacy as a profession is, people are going to realise what fun it is, hopefully, and hopefully also some of the bandwagon jumping charlatans who've never done data protection in their lives until 3 months before GDPR, when they suddenly badge themselves as experts, they're going to fall away, because it's going to become increasingly obvious that they don't know what they're talking about. A lot of the work I do these days is running around clearing up their messes. People put in cosmetic fixes for the enforcement date. Now they're realising that doesn't actually work in terms of business process, and they're going, okay, let's sit down and work through this properly now that the panic is over. And that, I think, is a good thing. The panic was largely unnecessary.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for speaking with me this afternoon, and I think that's going to have been really insightful for a lot of people.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.